2014, aerial archaeologists capture images of a strange-looking feature in the Jordan Valley.
Satellite images of a place called Tel Hemme in Jordan brought archaeologists to investigate the site.
Analysis of data from the site reveals something completely unexpected.
It turned out that it was a large slag heap.
It's relatively easy to identify metal slag using satellite images if you have the correct range of bandwidths to work with.
The satellite data indicates that Tel El Hameh is saturated with iron. As they dug deeper, archaeologists realized they had struck something very unusual. An ancient ironworks dating back to a time before most of mankind could work the metal. The site has links with an ancient culture called the Mitanni.
They were one of the great powers in the Near East for a couple of hundred years. They had started off as the enemies of Egypt because the Egyptians were expanding their empire northwards. But after a while, they became allies, and there is certainly a lot of correspondence surviving between the kings.
The discovery of a source of prehistoric iron could offer an answer to a mystery that's eluded archaeologists for more than 90 years. The mystery begins in the Valley of the Kings, Egypt. Here, ancient Egyptian pharaohs once lay buried among untold riches of gold and gems. In 1922, British archaeologist Howard Carter stumbled across the biggest archaeological discovery of the 20th century.
The tomb of Tutankhamun remains one of the most stunning archaeological discoveries of all time.
The tomb really captured people's imagination, which led to a whole outburst of Egyptomania, where everything Egyptian was sexy and cool.
The 3,300-year-old tomb was filled with treasure.
Tutankhamun's mummy was absolutely covered in jewelry, collars, amulets, but also 2 daggers. And one of those daggers had an iron blade.
But King Tut lived during Egypt's Bronze Age, at a time when iron manufacture was technologically impossible.
How did King Tut obtain iron when iron basically didn't exist?
One possible answer comes from a set of tablets written in an ancient Middle Eastern script at the time of King Tut's grandfather.
The Amarna letters are a series of ancient texts that date from the time period right before Tutankhamun's reign. And among other things, they mention a series of gifts sent to Egypt by rulers of neighboring kingdoms.
Included in this list is a number of daggers with iron blades. Is it possible that this is the source of that dagger?
According to the Amarna tablets, the Pharaoh of Egypt received iron daggers from people with close links to the iron smelting site discovered in Jordan.
If we could identify one of these daggers sent by the king of Mitanni to Tutankhamun's grandfather as being the one found on his mummy, that'd be wonderful. But there's no real means of being able to join the dots here.
On the face of it, the coincidence of the Amarna letters with the iron smelting site looks compelling. But when archaeologists investigate further, they realize the dates don't match.
It's a very disputed site. The dating is very, very disputed.
Though archaeologists still debate the exact start date, the site at Tel El Hameh may have started production too late for Tutankhamun.
This dates to probably about 1000 BC, which makes it 300 years or so after Tutankhamun.
But some experts claim the mainstream Egyptian timeline could be off by as much as 300 years, which would put Tutankhamun back in the frame. Yet there is another more significant obstacle to the idea the dagger was forged by Egypt's advanced neighbors. Chemical analysis of its iron yields shocking results.
This particular dagger doesn't rust. and that's what makes it special.
The quality of the iron is fantastic. It's pure almost, made in a kind of technology that would happen only centuries later when people became experts at creating iron.
The blade is so pure that in over 3,000 years, it hasn't rusted at all.
No one in the world is capable of producing that kind of metal in pre-modern times.
The people of Tel El Hamed may have been good metal workers, but no one on Earth was capable of making such high-quality iron back then. All the clues lead to the same remarkable conclusion. This iron wasn't mined by man.
So there's a high content of nickel and traces of cobalt, which indicates in all likelihood that this metal is not from Earth.
The discovery leaves only one possible conclusion. This iron came from the sky.
The sky is hugely important for Egyptian mythology. There are gods of the sky. Any kinds of things coming from the sky would be seen as potentially gifts or some kind of offering of the gods.
Ancient hieroglyphs throw further light on these deities.
When you look at some early religious texts, it talks about the bones of the gods being made of iron. Not only that, the term for iron was bir empet, which means iron from the skies.
The ancient Egyptians believed that iron came from the heavens. While the dagger may not have been delivered by a god, modern satellite images have shed light on how it could have gotten here.
There are a lot of scientists who scan satellite imagery for interesting features on Earth's surface. Well, a really interesting feature was found in Egypt in about 2008.
A mineralogist found on satellite imagery a perfectly preserved crater surrounded by more than 1,000 kilograms of meteoric iron.
It's very possible that a clever blacksmith recognized the metallic qualities of this stone and decided to experiment and discovered that, in fact, he could hammer it into a blade.
When archaeologists investigate the site, they analyze fragments from the ground.
So we can reconstruct the compositional characteristics of the meteorite. And the bad news is that it's not a match, so it's very unlikely that the dagger was crafted out of that specific metal.
This particular meteorite is not the source of the dagger, but the search continues.